I'm with Deputy Roy Herissier, who's a representative of Parish of St Saviour, and with one of his parishioners, Graham. And they're going to discuss issues that might arise during the coming election. Over to you, gentlemen.
Well, thank you very much, Roy, for popping in this afternoon. With the elections coming up fairly soon, and being one of your constituents, I thought it would be a good idea to meet with you to discuss issues that not only are concerned to me, but I believe the majority of the electorate are concerned. And I think many people, like myself, are totally disillusioned with the present government that we have, and the ability of our existing politicians to make what most people would call common sense decisions. So I would just like to ask you some very simple questions, and hopefully get some very clear answers as to how you feel about different things. Firstly, ministerial government. How well do you think this type of government is working?
I think it's not working very well, Graham, at the moment. I was a great supporter, and am, of government reform, of the total government reform, that's electoral reform and ministerial government. But I think it's had the effect of dividing the House. It might have worked, it certainly could have worked with a party system, which we haven't got, and it might have worked had there been a commitment to consensus government, in other words, drawing in people of different views and getting them to work together. Unfortunately, the people who are active in the Council of Ministers, in my view, have not done that, and deliberately, and that's very sad.
It really is, isn't it? What improvements do you think could be made to make the present system more efficient, bearing in mind we probably can't go and will never go back to what we were before? So what improvements do you think could be made and should be made to improve what we have?
Well, if we can't go back to a committee system, and of course there is the option of going back to what you might call the shortened committee system, which of course was the way that Guernsey chose, and it was a proposition put forward by Senator Mike Vibert, which we did reject at the time, but I must admit I've thought about that quite a lot. The other way to go forward, if we can't go back to that, is probably to have people in senior positions who can run consensus government. That is not happening at the moment. There's too much division, there's too much energy being put by what I might call the excluded members on propositions, things that were things properly discussed when they were being formulated. You could talk through these propositions, you could probably incorporate a lot of them, and you wouldn't have to go through all the theatrics of putting propositions forward. Often, because the legislation is so advanced, it's very difficult to change it when it reaches the floor of the House, sadly.
Can I just one comment? Jersey attempts to have a national and international government, or local government, all rolled into one. It expects an awful lot of the people. But in the UK, of course, you do have an awful lot of other bodies. You do have a House of Lords, which checks all legislation. You do have stacks of committees over there checking legislation that goes through. You've also got the advantage of 600 odd MPs. You've got all sorts of specialist subcommittees set up to look at specific issues. You've got a very active press. You've got all sorts of groups, lobby groups, political parties. There's so much scrutiny, for want of a better word, going on with government in the UK and challenging people on their decisions. That doesn't happen in Jersey. That's a worrying aspect. The scale of the place won't allow it to happen.
It's partly the scale, Mike, but I also think it's partly the way we've organised it. I mean, at the moment, obviously we don't properly do legislative scrutiny, and that is a thing where I've again had to revisit my thoughts. I think it would be a good idea. We can either do that through a dedicated legislative scrutiny subcommittee, for example, or we can do it through a second house. And it was never a big issue when clothing was being discussed, the second house, although I have one constituent who did press the case very strongly. And I believe we should revisit that issue, quite frankly. We've got other small legislatures like the Isle of Man, Bermuda. They do have second houses. They do have that pause for thought, so to speak. And I begin to wonder whether we shouldn't have done it here, quite frankly.
Talking about scrutiny, which you've both mentioned, in your opinion, is it working satisfactorily And if not, why not?
In some respects, it's not working, Graham, and the reason is it's not got an awful lot of power. And a second reason is that, in my view, we as panels have to become much more assertive. Now, the one I was involved with, Education Home Affairs, as you know, we did take that decision. We said we would start running propositions, we would start making statements about key issues, and we would do quicker scrutinies, because it is a very lengthy process. I think the examination of policy, in many cases, is working well. But if it gets nowhere, if you're being rejected by the executive on not very strong grounds, on that basis it's not working. There's too much effort being put into it, quite frankly, with limited outcome.
I have spoken to several politicians in the last year who have all said the same thing, that they feel that scrutiny as it is at present is a total waste of time. Now, time is valuable, so do you feel you're wasting your time, or do you think there's hope for it to improve, to solve these problems?
Well, unless, Graham, we get a party system and then we get a proper opposition, and there's no doubt some members see scrutiny as an opposition, and it frustrates them that it doesn't work that way, so that's created some problems. I think at the moment, and until we've got the report in on the reform of the states again, I think we've got to try and make it work. And probably it means approaching the right topics. At the moment, as you know, we review lists of topics, some from members of the public, some generated by members of the panel. I think we've got to be more focused. I think we've got to be much more assertive about the outcomes, and we've got to do what we were trying to do, bring propositions to the states, publicise the results, because a lot of people go on and on about certain issues, and they don't realise that in the recent archives of the states there are major reports about these issues where all the issues are laid out, not in a sensationalist way. And of course the problem with scrutiny is if you do it well, it's not politically a very sexy thing. You know, it's very methodical, it looks for the methodical collection of evidence and that often doesn't excite people. But you'd be amazed at the quality of a lot of the reports. And yes, we've been criticised about public engagement. We've got to look at how we pursue public engagement. There's no doubt we don't do it as well as we could.
You've been a bit unfortunate as far as the departments, Home Affairs and Education, have been looking within themselves. So there hasn't been a lot coming out which you can scrutinise.
No, we've been desperately disappointed. Education, virtually everything there has been under review. And there are major issues, well, we all saw from the school fees debate, like the future of secondary education, we wanted to get our teeth into. And in fact, the more it's gone on, and the more we've looked at how education has handled these issues, the more we've come to believe we should have jumped, quite frankly, straight in and started directing the public debate. But we did what we thought was the cooperative and courteous thing and allowed the department to generate its own papers and all that, and here we are at the end of session, and where are we? Similarly with Home Affairs, it's been very slow in developing new laws. The Minister said he's been very busy with things like the police suspensions and so forth, but I think we've been a bit more lucky there because we have gone out and pursued areas of concern, but whether we've hit the really big topics, no.
That being said, what chance do you think there is of any kind of party system being implemented?
I think it will be very slow, Graham. I think it's partly because there is a belief that it has to be left and right in Jersey, and Jersey doesn't fall very easily into the left and the right, particularly when you consider at the moment the way the election system operates. The country has a lot of influence, and the country is much more traditional than town. Yes. In the way it thinks about issues, and it's quite interesting because I have very much a split constituency. You know, I have a big element to the rural side, and I have the urban side. But the country has a very different view, and it is not enamoured of left-wing politics. And I think if you saw the emergence, and even then it would be a struggle, if you saw the emergence of more moderate centre-ground politics, it might be more attractive to people. But I'm not sure, no, I have to say, at the end of the day, when people talk to me, when I see what's happened to political parties and all the fragmentation in the States, I sadly have to say I don't think the States is ready for it.
Moving on, Roy.